Okay,
All right, so
we're recording.
I'll start and then I'll turn it over to Chad and Daniel, and then we'll go to the rest of the agenda. So Chad is one of my dear friends, and we've been working together for a very long time. And I'll let them introduce their firm in a second. Daniel I've not met, but I certainly know his role and what contribution they make to Chad's success. The reason I asked them to join us today is one Chad has very many remarkable characteristics, but one of them is he's a EOS, I guess, devotee. I don't know a strong enough word to describe how much Chad loves EOS. And
evangelist.
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 Okay.
Evangelist. There you go.
Yeah.
That's a great word. That's a great word. But the for today's context, what they do a particularly good job doing is they use basically EOS techniques, particularly level 10, to drive all the meetings and discussions that they have with clients. And that's very important with every single client, but in particular, they do a lot of co-managed work where EOS is kind of the foundation of program management, is building those kinds of relationships. So it's going to have universal value, but those of you who do co-manage are going to have particular value. And what I always liked about EOS was that it is a very disciplined way to have a meeting. And then it has built into it metrics and agreements and discussions and recordings of what we agreed to last time and what we're going to do this time and what we're going to do next time. So it's a very, very good way for you to organize your business reviews or any kind of business meeting, honestly, that you have with clients. And it's also a very good way to build commitments from clients throughout the relationship in a way that's going to improve both client service, but also obviously roadmaps and budgets and those kinds of things. So they were graciously agreed to invest some of their time today to talk to our group about that. And I know in particular, Andy was interested in this. You know, he may not be quite the evangelist that Chad is, but he's certainly down that path as well. So with that, Chad, do you mind just giving a brief introduction of NuWave and, you know, your company and size and number of clients and those kinds of things?
Sure, absolutely. First of all, how much time do we have, Michael?
As much as you want.
All right. Well, I won't take up your whole meeting, but yeah. So just first of all, Michael, thanks for saying all those nice things about me. You know, I feel the same way about you, and for everybody else, I pay Michael to say those nice things. He's a great guy. No, I've had the pleasure of knowing Michael for several years, and I consider him a mentor and a friend and everything else. So as Michael said, we're an EOS company, but I really wanted to focus today on what we've done with that, giving the credit to EOS for opening our eyes of there is a better way to run a meeting, a better way to manage your business, and then ultimately for us, a better way to manage our clients. So kind of a few things all happened at the same time. We are, first of all, NuWave Technology Partners is a 18-year-old managed IT company started by my brother and I in 2005. Daniel, who I'll let him introduce himself. I'll go through a few things, but Daniel is our client experience manager. And when I turn it over to him, I'll have him tell you about himself and his background and also share some of what we're doing. But I wanted to just touch on a few things. As Michael said, first of all, we implemented EOS 8 years ago. I heard from clients, I heard from friends, I heard from anybody that I talked to that it completely changed the way we did our business, the way that we interacted with our clients, and the way we interacted with our team, for that matter. Out of that came, for everybody familiar with EOS, came the requirement for us to adopt core values, and we truly try to make all of our decisions about hiring, firing, bringing on a client, letting go a client, pretty much really try to run all of our decisions through those core values. For us, it's trust, knowledge, relationship, and give a shit. Those are our 4 core values. We have them printed on challenge coins. That if you're familiar with challenge coins, everybody has one, and we truly live by those. The other thing that happened was, in addition to EOS, and at about the same time, we joined Taylor Business Group. Another thing that I would say had just a huge impact in our business and completely changed our organization That's not a plug for TBG, but that is just a reality. We're a better company after spending the last almost 10 years in Taylor Business Group. And then Michael doing direct coaching with us for several years. So all of those things have just been, and being parts of your different groups, Michael. So I'd say all of those things have just really helped make us a better company. And then the last thing that leads into why we made a big change in how we deliver services to our clients is our CTO came to one of our leadership team meetings, and we had a private cloud back when Microsoft sunset Small Business Server, SBS. At the same time, we had an electronic health record product that was also sunset, and they all needed a place to go. So we spun up, for those of you in Michigan, you'd be familiar with a company called US Signal. We spun up our own private cloud on their network. We owned everything, but we did it on their backbone. And I like to say we had a private cloud before Microsoft and Amazon did, but we did that, actually just closed it down last year. But in running your own cloud like that, anybody that's done it knows that it's a huge investment. And our CTO came to us at one of the meetings, of course, managed by NuWave, this network that's offering, and said, I've got two options. We're running out of storage. You can do the $80,000 option that'll buy us another year or two, or you can do the $130,000 option. And then, that's going to be on the newer technology and all these reasons why we should do it. And it was funny. I remember sitting in the meeting thinking, is this how our clients feel? I've got two bad options. And so that was when Kyle, my business partner, our leadership team, said, okay, we've got to really, truly eliminate surprises as much as possible. Any of us in this business know that storage is a very predictable thing. So it's not like we just found out that week that we needed to make some investments in storage, for example. So we started saying, okay, one of the things that we do in EOS is planning and budgeting. Why don't we just adopt that for all of our clients, a requirement that every client has a technology plan and a budget. I often hear from our clients over the years that IT seems like this black hole of expenses, and I never know. You guys are going to come to me with these things I have to buy, these things I have to do, and I never know what from one meeting to the next what surprise I'm going to get. So we made it really our mission and we adopted this mantra of no surprises as much as possible, even down to information that we document the hell out of everything, and probably a lot of you do as well. But we said anything that we've been told or we should know, don't ask the client unless we've exhausted our ability to find the information that we should have or we should know. And we feel that same way about technology plans and budgets. We know our client's network. We're responsible for it. We know it better than anybody. So let's, to the best of our ability, give them a couple of year plan and budget. And then synthesizing down from that, if you're familiar with EOS, is the multi-year plan. Boils down to a 1-year plan, and that boils down to quarterly meetings. We call them our quarterly meetings. Probably most people call them quarterly business reviews. We adopted the phrase strategic business reviews, or an SBR, still held quarterly. And then, as Michael said, the format of our meetings, I'll give Keith Volker on our team has been with us since we started, almost since we started about 18 years ago, and has been instrumental in development of a lot of things we're talking about. I say we, but it's he, and spent a lot of this time, took BrightGauge and built out just a lot of what Daniel's going to show you has been built out internally. I know there's a lot of tools now over the last couple of years that have come on the market. We've evaluated all of them. We haven't found one that does as much or more than what our in-house tools have done. If I did it all over again, I wouldn't suggest building it yourself, of course, probably like a lot of things, but if you can find one that gets you 80% of the way there, we just have already made the investment. So the last thing then is I had a client come to me and said, Chad, I'm really tired of having your salespeople come out here. I love NuWave. I love your techs. I love you. But just your salespeople are always come out here trying to sell me things. And this was one of my very first clients. In fact, they're still a client today. I think they might have been our first one 18 years ago. So we sat down, and what he said to me is, he said, I just want more time with your techs and really looking at where I'm taking my business and strategy and everything else. And that was a real, I'll say a kick in the gut, but also just a wake-up call for us. I think it was 5 years ago, 6 years ago. And he said that he made that comment to me. So we sat down as a leadership team and said, okay, what if we took account management and moved it under operations? Because it is the product that we're selling is managed services. This whole idea of everything we're talking about that I've already just talked about is the product we're selling. So by definition, if it's delivery, isn't that operations? Unlike the 20 years in this industry of always hearing that account management fell under sales. I went to one of my Taylor Business Group meetings, and Michael remembers this. Everybody told me that I was a blanky blank idiot. Account management is under sales, and that's where it lives. I've since learned that that operationally mature companies put account management under operations. I guess we were onto something, but we moved once you become a NuWave client. So then and there, 5 some years ago, we made a decision. Account management, which we call client experience, is an operational function. It reports up to our VP of operations. That is everything after you've become a client is now operations. So our account managers, which we call client advocates, report up to our client experience manager, which is Daniel, and then Daniel ultimately reports to our head of operations, and the rest is history. So I wanted to use this time to explain why we're doing what we're doing. We've had just glowing feedback from our clients. Michael can tell you that our numbers, when you look at our ratios, they're at or above some of the peer metrics in TBG, specifically our non-recurring revenue, and even our client attrition, everything, all of our metrics are very good. So I'm going to turn it over to Daniel to introduce himself, take you through some visual examples of what we're doing, and then happy to answer any questions that all of you have.
Thanks, Chad. It looks like Andy has a question.
I'll wait till after you're done, Daniel. It's really about new clients and bringing them into an operationally CAM-oriented role, and so that's something I'm interested in understanding.
Certainly. Well, thank you, Chad, for that background. So Dan Lipinski, been in IT almost 20 years now. Started at the University of Michigan, worked in their IT labs. So born and raised in Michigan, but had some time in higher ed as an IT director down in Texas. And then I actually worked for a competitor to NuWave for about 5 years in MSP in Grand Rapids. So I've got a lot of good experience and some thoughts about how that went versus how we work at NuWave. And as Chad stated, it's very interesting to see the difference with client experience, how that plays out versus not having that department, having worked at a competitor. So we'll dive into this. Does everyone have a good understanding of EOS and kind of the format of how that works? Format for meetings.
I'm just learning it, so I can't speak to that otherwise.
Try to step through this fairly slowly, but if you guys have questions, just go ahead and stop me and we'll try to unpack it a bit. But I want to start with just a simple SPR agenda. I think that would be a good place to start. It incorporates a lot of the components and pieces of EOS. It's not all there, not everything is EOS, but the major framework is there. So we'll start there. If you guys have questions, again, just stop me and we'll try to unpack how that all works. So this is just an example. This is a PDF report that comes from BrightGauge. BrightGauge is the tool that amalgamates all of our data. All of our data lives in ConnectWise, with a few exceptions, right? There's IT Glue, but most of it comes from ConnectWise, and BrightGauge, puts that all in via API and builds these reports. Now, these reports are created manually, as Chad stated. So this is not something that came off the shelf. This is something that Keith and the team put a lot of time and effort into. So, you guys see my screen okay?
Yep.
A little bit. Segue is a function of EOS, the meeting agenda, the meeting framework, and this is there to break the ice. This is ideally a 5-minute intro where everyone in the room identifies a personal best, so something that's personal to them, and then a business best. They just talk through it. Again, it's there to kind of ease the air in the room and kind of get everyone on a more even keel and inject a little bit of levity into the meeting, so it's not so business focused at the beginning. So it's a very good tool to kind of help people relax a little bit at the end of the day. Anyone have any questions on that function of that again? All right. So in our SBR strategic priorities, these are the 5 buckets where all the different components fit into. So we'll explore this a little bit more in depth as we move down. You guys will see examples of this. In compliance, this is our wheel of compliance. We work with a lot of companies that have varying compliance needs, and it's a big driver as of late as to alignments. It's a big driver to aligning to our standards. It's a big driver for cyber insurance, as you guys are probably aware. So we're working in the CMMC space. We're working in some of the NIST spaces, 4557 for the IRS, HIPAA, of course, PCI, et cetera. Then we look at who our primary contact is at the business, and then we look at important contacts that can approve whether it's work or whether it's purchases, whether it's different types of things needed for service or projects or client experience. Scorecard is a function of EOS. It is in the framework, and what this comes from IT alignments. And now, as Chad stated, client experience is comprised of mostly the CA, or AKA a VCIO in that capacity, that the client advocate is really aligning IT strategy, looking at IT strategy, looking at business outcomes, helping drive that for that client. Not an extremely technical level role, but somewhat technical. It depends on an end client as well as how we assign those CA roles. So if it's the client that's not needing a highly technical person, then it's a less technical CA or client advocate. If it's a client that is larger, more complex, we have a highly technical CA fill that seat. But these scorecard items, these are driven from IT alignments. And the other component in the client experience department is the system analyst. The system analyst is the technical expert in that company's network. They understand that network inside and out. From a pre-sales type engagement, looking at driving standards, new projects, et cetera, or from a purely technical standpoint, looking at alignments, looking at what they have in their environment and aligning to best practices. So whether it's Veeam, whether it's Citrix, whatever it may be, we're looking at best practices, and we have a checklist of over 100 different things to look at. Make sure that their IT systems, their software are aligned with not only our standards, but best practices as well. And these alignments will drive a lot of projects. That's where we get a lot of to-dos and issues and initiatives, which we'll look at here in a second. But the alignments are a key component of how we operate in client experience. Any questions so far? Does that make sense?
Ask me a question, Daniel. On the client side, who attends your business reviews, your strategic reviews?
So the SBRs are attended by the CA, client advocate, and the systems analyst.
Okay. And on the client side, who's typically is in the meeting?
Really, it's a C-level executive. It's maybe an IT manager if it's a co-managed situation. Mm-hmm. So it's and then potentially someone taking notes on both sides. So. All right. What this looks at, again, we go in and we review their systems, and if they're not in line, we'll make a note. We'll talk about it in the meeting. If they are aligned, obviously you can see here that it states that, but sometimes this will drive projects, it'll drive issues, which again, we'll get into. And this is just a breakdown of top tickets in specific categories. This is not a component of EOS, but and then service delivery, open versus closed, just looking to make sure there are no outliers here where we've got a lot of open and then not closed. Just a quick graph. Look at automated versus human closed tickets, and then we look at projects here, and then projects that are current. Here's an example, and then projects that we have completed in the last 3 months.
Wow.
Projects that we've completed in the last 12, and then total projects for the life of the customer. Feedback, this is something we just do to break up the meeting a bit, because at this point the CA is talking quite a bit. So we try to pause and give the client some time to reflect and also speak and kind of break up the cadence of the meeting as well. But we'll get to this. Feedback is a component somewhat of EOS. Generally, most meetings are scored, but we don't have that specifically within the SBR framework. we do internally, but the SPR framework's a little different. We'll get to that at the end of the meeting, at the end of this agenda. Headlines. Now, this is a component of EOS. This is just to talk about things that are new in the organization for NuWave, but also for our clients. So an example here is Windows support. This is stating that NuWave is going to offer support for Windows 11, just making that formal. Other things, the client could have new employees. NuWave could have new employees. It's just very topical. It can be IT related. It can be human resources related. Just make sure that everyone's on the same page with change with the organization mostly, and then change with IT potential process or larger macro trends, Microsoft, etc. And then this is kind of the meat of the SPR as we get into future project planning next 18 months, and renewals. I'll go back and we'll digest this a little bit, and then
Daniel, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to just insert something here. This isn't something that from our business standpoint, by having everything identified as an opportunity, we use ConnectWise, so having everything identified with a ticket and an opportunity allows us for budgeting and planning as well. So these are things that we've got agreement from the client on that these are things that you need to do, and this is when we being the client and NuWave agree that you're most likely going to do it the quarter or the month that you are most likely going to do it. And then that in turn allows us to do a significant amount of very educated business planning as far as resources and everything else within our own business. So wanted to make sure that's been a very important tool for us.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, Chad. To me, this is the secret sauce. This is, again, having worked at an MSP that did not do this timeline, this roadmap, this is the key to selling effectively into the client. I think, and there are things here, as you see, that these are items that are not technically approved, and we'll keep this here until they get approved. Now, these are likely a need for the client, a must-have. Either it's aligning to our standards, it's aligning to a compliance standard. So we keep these on here. And these dates, we've got a cost. We have the date when it's first introduced. We have the date where we need some sort of decision from the client so that we can hit timelines, either internal or external, or for them for compliance reasons, and an expected start date. And again, this is key to driving these initiatives, to driving some of these sales cycles as well. So these will stay on here until they get resolved in some manner. And sometimes they'll funnel down into issues, and sometimes not. But it just depends on the function of what this item is needed for. The future project planning next 18 months. This, again, a lot of this is driven from business use case for the customer. A lot of it's driven from our IT alignments. Either things are changing where we need to align, or there's VMware updates, there's Windows updates. There's a whole host of things that could drive these initiatives, but getting them on this agenda and giving a fairly long runway is the key, so that these customers, as Chad stated, it's not a blind side. It's not coming out of the blue. They've got a long time to digest the cost, the timing, what's composed of what's needed. I see Andy, you have a question. I'll mute them.
Good.
Big brushstrokes. I notice you have broad categories for strategic priority. So CE, I assume, is customer experience, and then you get healthy infrastructure, future technology planning, IT quality, operation efficiency. How many of these broad categories do you have?
Yeah, and thanks for bringing that up, Andy. That's where we talked about unpacking that from up here. These are these 5 buckets: strategic priorities, the IT quality, the healthy infrastructure, operational efficiency.
Thank you.
Yep.
I didn't connect that dot.
Yeah,
that's
and
very helpful.
I appreciate you pointing that out. And that's how that connects there. So back to this again, it gives costs. It gives either one-time project cost plus a monthly ongoing if there's a subscription. And these timelines are derived from, again, alignments, drivers, compliance, etc., customer need. But again, the runway is key, I think, with this timeline, and giving a long runway to explain to the client, for them to digest it, for them to budget for it as well. And In these meetings, we agree on these things, and then they get added to clients' budgets, and it's not a surprise. It really helps drive sales. Now, sometimes they'll agree and it doesn't work out, or there's not a budget at the time. But again, looking at close ratios, looking at opportunity closes, we are very effective, as Chad stated, using this method. And then renewals, again, same idea. These are SSLs, domains, SmartNet, Meraki licensing, etc. Same idea here, just getting them on the docket, giving a long time to digest. And then initiatives and issues. So this is a function, a framework of EOS. This is the identify, discuss, and solve. Now, what we do internally is all of this lives in ConnectWise, but we have a project framework for this. So there's a project template for each client. It's we call it the Client Experience Project 2023 for Acme Company. And there is a project template that has all these types of categories in there. So these funnel into our reports. So for instance, if we're in an SBR and we have an issue, it gets logged and it gets put into ConnectWise, and then that's where these come from. And so there's a cycle to record and a cycle to identify, discuss, and solve. Does that make sense? That's the key component that you guys, I can show a picture of that if that helps. It helps drive this framework as well.
Have you just brought compliance framework into their operational priority and issues and planning? It's the way I would look at this, is that you're setting up a whole process for them to follow, much like one would do in compliance to better corporate health or IT health.
It's funny you asked that question, because as Michael and some of you may be aware of NuWave, we were one of the very early pioneers with NIST 80171, now CMMC, HIPAA 10, 12 years before that. And we've gotten to the point where I'd much rather work with a company that has compliance requirements than one that has no compliance requirements, because they get it. Exactly what you just pointed out.
Yeah, this is what it looks like you're doing. So this leads into my onboarding question from before. So I'm totally with you on now.
Yeah, certainly. Any other questions before we proceed?
This is really profound in your approach. I asked a couple questions in chat when people are ready for it, but I'm really grateful for it.
Yeah, certainly. We look at, again, this stuff is categorized and lives in ConnectWise, and it comes here to via BrightGauge, this report. So unsupported devices, again, this would be a driver for a project. It would go up to this portion here, your project planning. As an example, end of life 2012 R2. And then again, this is a part of an alignment where we do we look at all the services that we offer, and we look at what the customer is consuming. So this again lives in ConnectWise, and it funnels into BrightGauge to this report. And as our tools have changed, more of these are required. So again, as a driver to pushing IT, I guess sales into the organization, as our standards change, as our compliance changes, it gets logged here as well. So they'll see, for instance, if they're not aligned to our standards in this report, and it stays here, it lives here, and it helps drive that sale. T-Canvas, this is just showing a function of, again, a different way to show what we offer and what they're consuming. And long-term future items, this is something that is outside the window of 18 months. So we talked about runways and roadmaps. This is an even longer runway for the client. This looks out past 18 months again from this section here. So we can give them a long timeline as to what's coming down the pike.
Your competitors never stand a chance against you guys with this. They really don't.
Again, having worked in both different MSP and having to try and sell into it without this type of setup, it was very challenging. It didn't consume a lot, but with this, like I said, for what Chad stated, it's quite the driver. as compared to peers. And then this is an IT glue pull in from Breakage, just looking at domain names that are expiring, the amount of time left. This function here, Net Promoter, this is somewhat similar to the EOS scoring the meeting. Yeah, this is a little different. This is we ask the client on a scale from 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend NuWave to another business? So this is a C-level person or an owner, decision maker, and then an end user, right? An employee or someone that's working the service often.
And Dan, if this was Tim, Tim's the guy that says you never give 10s, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Some people just don't give 10s, so you have to take it with a grain of salt. But yeah, it's an interesting question.
Is this Net Promoter Score only related to this client or across all clients?
This client. This is for this client. Yeah. And then this gets brought into a report by our ops director. He's managing and measuring this.
Do you find that your introduction to EOS to your customers causes them to want to learn more about EOS and how they might apply it, if they're not currently doing so?
I've seen both. I've seen clients. Yes, I've absolutely seen clients that have adopted EOS. We've also won business because as soon as we find out that each other are EOS, it's almost like we speak the same language, and it really puts us into a smaller pool of people that are bidding the work.
This is phenomenal. I mean, just the way that you presented this. How long did it take you to get to this point?
I have to ask Keith on that.
I can tell you that this has been probably 5-6 years in the making. And it's evolving all the time.
No, this is masterful. I mean, this is like art to me. And when I look at this.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's really amazing.
I will take zero credit for it. So we'll make sure the people that did it.
No, NuWave gets the credit for it, but it's a great team effort. It shows what can be done with discipline and time and feedback from the customers, I assume, to some degree.
So this is an example of that project template. I mean, this is just a test company, so there's not a lot filled out here, but you have the headlines that align to the report. You have the to-do list that aligns to that report. Now they're not one-to-one.
Is Keith a cyborg as one of your project elements?
Yeah. Again, this was just a test. You can see to-dos come out, initiatives and issues will produce those to-dos for either the systems analyst or the CA. So everything gets tracked and measured, and the ticket is opened as Chad stated. So that we look at it, complete it, we bring it back to the report for the next quarter. We make sure that everyone is being held accountable. And sometimes there are to-dos for the client too, and that gets measured here to make sure that again everyone is contributing.
How do you give feedback to the customer? Is that only on an SBR basis, a monthly basis? How often do you do that? As far as their to-dos?
So it's a case by case. How do we give feedback? It is challenging. A lot of times it can be challenging because they don't report to us. They have other people they report to. So sometimes getting action on that requires some creativity. It's not often, but it happens more in the co-managed space in the larger companies than the smaller companies.
Yeah, Daniel, this is where I was kind of going with co-manage. You have three typical levels there. You have got the IT technician who might be too busy taking care of their own nest, I guess. You've got a department level manager who's trying to deal with whatever budgets he's got to deal with. And then you got your C-level who may have made a commitment to this, but hasn't allocated resources to it. As the client experience manager, how do you navigate those types of tiering in a co-managed situation?
I think it's an interesting question. I think having this framework really helps. I think the cadence of this and everyone knows what's needed. There's not a lot of deviation from this framework. So I'm trying to think of some good examples to unpack that a little bit. But
so let's say that you're going to be moving everyone. I noticed you didn't have vulnerability scanning on this. They recognize that without vulnerability scanning, there is an enhanced risk to their organization. How would you get them to, one, the C-level says, all right, we're ready to go forward with vulnerability scanning. but the IT manager goes, I've got other projects I want to do before this, as an example.
Yeah, so just for definition, everybody, and this is something Michael and I've talked about a lot in our world, it seems like there's several definitions of co-managed. With NuWave's definition of co-managed, it is the difference between our co-managed and our fully managed offering is that we exclude end user support. That is our demarcation point. So vulnerability scanning would actually be if we can get, yes, if we can get C-level commitment on it, then it's something we're moving forward with and completing that work. So essentially, we just exclude help desk and end user support when we
that's exactly what I did in an offering for a customer who has engineers in Sri Lanka. I said, we'll do co-managed, but you got to take care of Sri Lanka. Won't be doing that. So yeah.
Now we have 2 flavors of managed services, but each one has we call it it maps to CMMC level 2 requirements. And we have another company, Prescott, that we can unpack on a different day. But one of our senior consultants actually has taken a company through a DIBCAC successful assessment. And anybody familiar with CMMC knows that there's not a lot of them. I think he was number 39 last month in the country. So when we talk about CMMC compliance, we actually have a team member that's led a successful assessment, and we mapped our CMMC level 2, or said differently, we mapped our NuWave 360 GRC offering, governance, risk, and compliance, to CMMC level 2. So wow. each of our fully managed and co-managed has a variation or a variant of it that is called NuWave 360 GRC. If they don't have a compliance requirement, it is more difficult. If they do, it's a lot easier because there's things they have to do.
Exactly, Chad, and that's what we've seen. Andy, the drivers heavily are compliance, and that's why we like to highlight it here and try to understand not only compliance but also cyber insurance as that starts to round out.
I actually think this has a much, not from a compliance standpoint just in and of itself, but overall having customers have an awareness that I mean, if someone's in HIPAA, PCI is more restrictive than HIPAA is. You think about the security requirements for that and that if customers want to work with other businesses, they're going to have to be SOC compliant, and that drives it even higher. And how that is really changing the landscape today.
Yeah, and a lot of our clients have multiple requirements, and we've mapped all of these here for the most part. And I know you can find other people that have done it as well, but our compliance team has mapped all of those different frameworks to each other. So it becomes easier if you have to adopt a new framework as a client, then you already are under, for example, I'll use CMMC or TISAC. That's actually one that just came up the other day with an automotive client. And they already had an ISO 27001, so we already knew, okay, here's some of your gaps if you're going to go to TISAC, for example.
Yeah, and alignments are structured so that we understand what compliances they are required to adhere to, and then our IT alignments, our system analysts going in there and answering those 100+ questions to making sure that they are aligned with either cyber liability and or their compliance. So those alignments where the systems analyst is going into all their systems and making sure they're dotting the I's and crossing the T's as they relate to compliance or cyber liability.
How do you address corporate compliance requirements based on their own internal policies that may supersede any one of these that you have? How does that fit into this?
Which part? Any one of what?
Well, let's say that they're working in a law firm, as an example, and they might have a customer that has stricter requirements than what they've had to maintain for themselves. How do you represent that in your compliance requirements mapping here?
Good question.
Compliance scheme, I should say it that way.
Yeah, I mean it's an interesting question. I haven't run up against that myself personally here at NuWave. I'm not sure if you have historically.
I haven't either. I've not had.
Then that's great.
Yeah.
That is a good question. I have to think through that, Andy. Let me think through that and I'll see if I can
just get another slice. Can I ask you a question? How long, when you do this for a typical client, how long does a session last?
Session is usually 1 to 2 hours. Depends on the size.
At least an hour, I guess. Yeah.
And how many people are in the room?
And your prep time for this, is it more than a couple hours?
I was gonna Yeah, Andy, I want to actually unpack that a second because that was a huge thing for us to get into the discipline of having what we recognized several years ago is that there's really 3 meetings for every meeting. There's a prep meeting, there's the meeting, and then there's the takeaway, the post meeting. So we have a client experience coordinator, and one of her big jobs is to make sure that every managed client always has a rolling 12 months of meetings. And if you think about that, that's actually 36 meetings for every client because there's an internal meeting that has to happen before this meeting. There's this meeting, and then there's the meeting after this meeting. That's another internal meeting. And it seems like a lot, but I can tell you that we are so much more efficient now doing that. Balls aren't dropped, things aren't forgotten. It's not that we're perfect, things still we still make mistakes.
Got a cadence for everything at this point.
We've got a cadence, but we also we run into, and I see these messages all the time, because they're scheduled always a year in advance. They're always scheduled a year out. And like you all, I'm guessing that the executives you're trying to meet with, they're busy. You go to schedule a meeting next quarter with them, good luck. And so we always have a rolling 12 months of meetings with every client.
Yeah, and that's a huge component. So to answer your question, the prep is probably 1 hour to 2 hours because what the team does is we go through this line by line and we make sure we have all of our questions answered to make sure everything on this report has been addressed and that there are no gaps. So the client asks us a question, we know what to respond with. We understand where the opportunities sit. We understand, what's happening with quoting, et cetera. So it is, as Chad stated, intensive, but you get really good at it. You create efficiencies, and it's a way to hold yourself accountable. And then, the output again, the after action meeting. Also, you look at to-dos. You get those things scheduled for the next meeting. So it's very cyclical.
Okay. I guess 2 quick questions too. So, what's your frequency? I mean, I think everybody would assume like quarterly, but do you have different cadences for different size customers, basically?
So depending on the size of the customer, we have the SBR, which is quarterly, but we also have tactical meetings, which can be weekly or monthly. Our larger clients will have weekly tacticals or monthly tacticals or bi-weekly tacticals, which is, again, just same kind of format. There's an agenda. It's not nearly as detailed, but it's looking mostly at issues and initiatives, making sure that we're on top of that stuff.
Yeah, then you did answer my second question, which was, what's the process outside of the strategic business review? And it sounds like feeding off of this, you have more of those, you have rocks and tactics and all that stuff, right? So this feeds into those more tactical meetings you talk about as well.
That's awesome. Either way.
Daniel, go ahead, sorry.
Oh, go ahead. I wanted to make a point, and if I want to share a screen when Daniel's done too, but let's answer your question, Andy.
The question is, a new customer who isn't familiar with EOS but has compliance issues, how do you get them to process at this level? I would suggest that there's a whole orientation that you take them through. And what is that like?
That would be another, we'd have to have another session with you guys to take you through our onboarding is a very methodical process that through a lot of trial and error and finding out that the relationship success is, if you're familiar with the theory of Gestalt, the theory of first impressions, really the success of that 5, 10, 15 plus year relationship with a client really comes down to that first month or so of them working with you. So we put a tremendous amount of effort into making sure that first day, that first month is just as great of an experience as possible. As much as possible, having a very, very professional relationship with the company that we're taking over from. So it's a great question.
It sounds like you really overwhelm them and you really bring them into your culture at that point. Is that what I'm understanding?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We've got another question, Daniel.
Yeah, hey guys, can you hear me?
We can.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I have a question regarding who you invite to these meetings. Usually people tend to have like a point of contact per company. Is there any recommendations you guys have in regards to who all should be in these meetings?
I'll tell you personally, I want to see, as Daniel said, I want to see executive sponsorship, preferably CEO, COO, CFO. I want to see executive sponsorship. I found, probably like you all, I found that it's really hard to have success if I don't have an owner or C-level sponsor of everything that we're doing. And that's where our leadership team, myself, my brothers, my business partner, Daniel, really our leadership team is I look at part of our job is making sure that we've got a great relationship with the executive sponsor. In addition to, and I think that maybe parlays into the question that you had earlier, Andy, of how with a co-managed relationship, how do you make sure that you've got I'll call it the technical relationship, but you've also got the business executive relationship. And we put a lot of emphasis. Relationships is one of our core values, one of our 4 core values. We put a ton of emphasis in constantly working on having a great relationship with that team. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. That helps.
And to add to Chad's point, we're looking at developing a principal consultant role to help drive those relationships at the C level, where there's a person that's focused on that is an expert in a lot of different things, but really driving those relationships at the higher level solely. So what does that mean? Does that mean lunches, golfing, just really getting to the next level on the relationship scale with those folks, especially in the larger companies, because a lot of times those CEOs are very busy, and sometimes they don't make it to every SBR. They'll make it to the annual planning, which is of the 4 quarterly meetings. One is an annual planning meeting, which looks heavily at budget, which is a little bit longer, dives a little deeper, asks some more pointed questions, and it really looks to set the table for the next year, as well as holistic budgets.
Daniel, I actually have a slide on that. I can, did you have any other things you were going to share? And I've got about 5 more minutes.
Yeah, certainly. Go ahead, Chad.
Okay, I'll share. This is a visual that and I did actually get permission from Gino Wickman, who created EOS. I got permission from him personally because you're going to see if you've read Traction or if you've been through EOS, this looks very familiar. They happen to copy NuWave and use orange in their color scheme at EOS. But so this is a part of a prospect presentation deck, but we take them through setting that expectation that we're going to have the quarterly review. We spent a lot of time on the very beginning making sure that weeding out the client prospect. So some of the questions that Andy, you asked, and I think maybe Aaron, you asked, who are we going to be working with? Can we get a sense that they're going to adopt our way of managing the network and managing this relationship? And that's all figured out over here in our Discovery Network Assessment. So if we find out over here that we don't think we're going to have success with them, we'll just be honest with them and tell them that we don't think they're a good fit, because we need commitment that they're going to make the investment of their time to give us those 4 meetings a year. This annual planning meeting is a lot of work for us. It's a lot of time for them, and we need to make sure that we have that buy-in. The last thing I'll show you, and I'll send this up to you all in email.
Can I ask you one thing, Chad? If I remember correctly, that you charge for those first 3 phases? You still do that?
We do. I'll tell you that in the last month or 2, we've seen decisions slowing down. They're not.
Yeah, I was just curious.
Yeah, they're not happening. It's just, and I don't know if anybody else has seen that. We've seen that in some of our peer groups. So I'm giving away our competitive things here, but we're looking at ways of discounting or removing those Discovery Network Assessment charges just to remove some of those speed bumps. But we have historically charged a pretty significant amount for that.
And I think it's an interesting question, because that kind of pre-qualifies somebody even more if they're willing to pay for that as opposed to get it for free. But. Exactly.
Yeah. So this is an illustration of our accountability chart. So Kyle and I, our head of operations, and then I left Daniel's name on here, but so our whole client experience team, as you can see, falls under operations. So I'll send this to you guys in an email. Happy to answer any other questions, but it spells out some of the terms and names of our different functions that Daniel talked about in his presentation. Any other questions?
I have a question. I don't know if it's for Chad or for Daniel, but seeing such a strategic plan, a long runway, since you've implemented this, what have you seen as an incidence of pushback against adopting your recommendation? So I would imagine previously there's a lot of reasons that a client would say, well, I'm not really ready for that. But here you're doing a lot of warm up, a lot of preparation, a lot of strategy. Do you still get a client, even though they're square in your ideal client profile, saying, "Oh, I'm not going to move forward"? And if that does occur, is that a line in the sand
Yeah, I have
to
a quick
determine is it a
anecdote.
client or not?
Go ahead, Daniel.
A quick anecdote, just recently, Keith and I were talking, and this is where that stuff lives. They've said no. Sometimes we'll keep it on here because it's a need either for a compliance reason or it's a need for our standards, et cetera. And we'll keep it on here. And there was a recent example where one of these lived here for a couple of years, and it was brought up every meeting for a couple of years, and finally the customer executed on it. They'd said no before. So as a quick example of that working.
We wear them out.
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to back down, right?
And keep in mind,
you're going to press on with what you know is right for their business.
Right.
And just because they say they're not ready doesn't mean that they won't. But you've spent a lot of time in meetings along the year or year and a half, and it's still there. So they do begin to understand that it is necessary, and you're not going to delete it, right? You're still going to press on.
Yeah,
eventually they'll decide.
We're very transparent that our client advocates are salaried positions. They are not commissioned, bonused. There's no financial compensation for them to be making these recommendations.
Right.
Our
it's
clients
not self-serving
know. Right.
Yeah, it's not self-serving in the client view. Right.
Exactly.
So that's good.
Yeah.
So they're recognizing that a technical, their technical person has their best interest at heart in making those recommendations. Go ahead.
And that's a huge component, I think. So Chad, you guys had tried it alternate ways, but maybe not as much success.
My question for you guys is how do you go about educating your customer about the new requirements for security or compliance as you go through your year? In other words, I don't assume you just do it at strategic business meetings. How are you saying, we need to do application whitelisting because this is what we're experiencing, or if we were to look at pen testing, for SOX, for example, compliance, getting to that level, how do you educate your customer? Thank you.
Yeah, and Daniel, I've got about 3 minutes. I've got to jump into another meeting. Go ahead and take the first bite at that, and I might have an add-on.
Yeah, so do I have to jump to you. So Andy, what we generally do is we just have, so for instance, a slide deck that we use. So our standards recently changed. We added more security tools to our standards for our managed services agreement. And so it was just a function of getting it on here. It was a headline. It was introducing it and going through some slideshows to have the client help them understand what's involved, why it's needed, why we're doing it. There is a change in cost, but it's providing these benefits, et cetera. So it's really just incorporating it into this cadence. And then after that, we put numbers to it. So it could be an evolution of a couple SBRs. It could be an evolution of some tactical meetings where we first bring it up. It's just a function of the size of the client and where it fits.
Yeah, and I've got two examples. 2 or 3 years ago, we told all of our clients, we give them a year. We said, by the end of the year, MFA is a requirement to be a NuWave client. And if you don't want to do that, start planning now for the transition because it's non-negotiable. We will not have a client at the end of this year that does not have MFA. Okay. We did the same thing with application whitelisting using ThreatLocker 2 years ago. I'm friends with an MSP owner that was ground zero for the Kaseya event. And after the forensics report came out, they said the only thing that he could have done that likely would have prevented the chaos that he had was application whitelisting. So that's just another example of things that we do. We give real stories. We tell our clients of things why we're doing them. It's not just to make more money. And we have very little pushback. We did have a medical office who said we're not going to do MFA 2 years ago, and we told them we were going to be offboarding them, and we did.
Yeah.
Yep. No,
and again, these frameworks allow for that type of discussion to happen, right?
Yeah,
Requires
and
probably
you know
different
what's
setup.
happening then. So that's great. Thank you for that. Sounds like you do it at the strategic planning level and not interquarter. Is that correct?
It depends. If there's tacticals, there's weekly tacticals, bi-weekly tacticals. It's just a function of the size of the client.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Well, Michael, I hope this was helpful for everybody. You get what you're looking for.
I did. And I think
absolutely.
I actually have questions, but I'll ask them separately.
All right. And Michael, you know, if you guys ever want to follow up, let us know if we get it on the calendar, you know, not tomorrow, but if you guys want to follow up, let us know. Happy to do another one.
I'd like to know when you're doing the offboarding meeting. I mean, excuse me, the onboarding meeting. I want to participate in that.
That'd be a 4-hour presentation, I'm thinking.
Exactly. All right. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Excellent
Thank you
work.
so much.
NuWave, you're on my list to see in big.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys.
There we go. I was waiting for it to refresh. So what was the reaction to that? Was that like rocket science or basic, aspirational, or how would we help you guys do something similar for yourselves? First of all, how many people would like to do something similar or something directionally similar?
Directionally, I would say it's probably going to take me a few years to get to that level. This is I didn't even know this could exist like this. Let me just put it to you that way, right? It was like, oh my gosh, there is a sky with stars, right?
Yeah,
No,
I
and
mean, I'm
think
very familiar with EOS because we've adopted the EOS platform at Taylor Business Group beginning in January. And Michael and I were talking about it earlier today, and I'm in 3 meetings a week that are driven based on the EOS platform, and it is a change agent. But I've not seen it deployed in a client model, which I think is absolutely brilliant.
I think it is too.
And I think you could look at it as you don't have to replicate EOS, but you have a framework to reference structure that brings a process to the client experience that I think is a differentiator, which was one of my big takeaways is how many of the companies out there in this industry do you think have any even semblance of that?
One hand.
Yeah, I would agree with you. So if in your market area, you were to just have, you know, an initial framework, the makings of a few areas of what EOS is about. I mean, and I'm not going to say replicate EOS, but I'm saying strategically develop a platform that brings the engagement with the account to a deeper level, that if they were ever to walk away, they wouldn't even think about walking away because
they have no one else to go to.
You're decoupling from what doesn't exist anywhere else, and you become an absolute necessity, and you're a vital operational aspect of how they think about their business. Because I just was on a call a little while ago today, or earlier this afternoon, with an owner, and they are a member in the Taylor Business Group, and they're in one of the groups, but I'm working with them in a direct engagement, and they're having a problem with clients who are not following their recommendations.
This solves that problem.
This solves that problem. Now, they know that they need to engage in a deeper, more meaningful way, and they just embraced a CAM model in their company, and that also kind of solves the kind of interaction you have with a client. It's not a last minute notification when an issue comes up, but you're part of the planning process. But they've had clients a couple who have left lately because they just didn't see the experience of what they felt it should look like. And I kind of challenged them to say, well, doesn't that say something to you? You know, we've been talking about defining what a strategic plan looks like, a informational series of meetings with clients that leads up to a QBR and getting them onto a QBR plan, and that you have something that's uniquely different that you can call your own. You could even brand it, and they're familiar with EOS, to really alleviate that problem, because they have clients who are sticking around that don't fit their ICP, and refuse to follow their protocols. And they've had to say, it's time for us to part ways. So I think it alleviates that, and it defines a client for life as a process. You know, I just couldn't think of a better example. So while it took them 5 years at NuWave to build what you see ultimately, it started somewhere, and it didn't look like that.
Mark?
And so I don't think you have to build something that's as complicated, but at least start it.
If you got permission for the last 2 sessions to take video snippets and say, this is what we're learning in our CAM meetings from the last session and this session, and you just touched on a couple of these things, you'd have people lining up.
Yeah.
At Big. They would really be doing that.
We'd like to think so.
And that was really my question. The next is, could I share some of this presentation with my PM group? Because that's how powerful I thought this was.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, sure you could.
All right.
I think it's funny you mentioned it, Andy, because I was thinking the same way. It's actually, I would even say 3 sessions ago, if you thought about the Doug Miller session on security, how he set up this longer term process.
Yep.
I mean, my guess would be he has something similar, just not EOS, right?
So from a strategic standpoint for the CAM, we need to get that onboarding session, because what we've clearly got is where you can go, what it can look like. Okay, how do we start this process moving forward, both internally ourselves and with our customer, which is, I think, the real power here.
It's actually interesting because there's been an intentional progression in the stuff for you guys, which was to show what I hope you guys got out of Doug Miller's presentation is a very practical way to talk about security, right? And basically saying, you know, my opinion is it's just going to be part of being a MSP.
Yeah.
People got to hit higher and higher standards of security just to be safe, right? And 2 sessions ago, what I liked about Eric's, I would layer on top of this one, was he had structure. It just wasn't as mechanized.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And his style's different than Chad's, obviously. But and then what he did a good job of was saying, you know, setting the context in his own way, and then talking through categories of things that matter. This is one step beyond that, which is, I think there's things we can, if you guys, I'd be happy to help you think about how to implement it. But the thing I took out of this was, I don't know how many categories it was, Andy, was it 5 or 6 or 7?
Yeah, he had five categories, I believe.
I think that's a good start.
Yeah.
Right. And it seemed to me that they were pretty, they're pretty like normal, you know, like if you get.
I just wanted to say back to Michael, I had a PM meeting before this one, and one of the owners said, you know, there's only 2 types of marketing: new prospective marketing or marketing to your existing customers. And I had to pause for a minute when he said he moves CAM under operations. I went, okay, this is a whole new game. When you think of it that way.
It got my attention.
Yeah, mine too. Makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
So it's open to debate, frankly, but
well, I see.
But there is a camp of people.
Michael.
Yeah, I think what it says, regardless of where they report, is relationship management should be a core business process.
No kidding.
And as a core business process, it has to be sitting under operations to some degree, right?
And those people are compensated differently.
Yeah.
And rewarded differently. And that's the paradigm shift, in my view.
Yeah, and I think you also get in this kind of discussion about VCIO versus CAM and all that stuff. I think VCIOs for sure should be under, and I think that guy was kind of a VCIO to me. Like he was, you know, so I think they should certainly be under operations. But what I want for you guys to do is how do we help you, right? So what I would suggest makes sense is reviewing that presentation, but don't be burdened by the complexity of it.
Well,
Right.
that's why I was asking how these things fit together, because it would obviously had to go. He's telling them what he's going to tell them. He said, this is how much time we're going to spend on each thing. These are the critical elements. By the way, this is the budget we've been talking about.
Yeah.
I think taking those
me,
SBRs and having them categorized would be more helpful as well.
Yeah, but to me, anything that was was a break gauge summary can be a spreadsheet too, right? I mean, right. So I mean, if you what I would encourage you guys to do, and I don't know, we have some relationship with some EOS guy now that I'm unaware of within TBG.
Yeah, his name's Adam, and he's my PM leader, right?
Okay.
So,
and it might be,
Steinhoff.
I don't know. I would suggest
Steinhoff,
you get, what I'll look at, what I might do, and what I might ask Mark's help in is, like, if you guys just need basic grounding in what like a level 10 meeting is, there's tons of stuff on that. You know, you could YouTube it and you'd find something useful. And then if we could start to think about, maybe as a group, if we said, if you had to do a more simple version of what Chad's doing, it might like start to look like this. Maybe Andy, you and I can work on it, or Mark and I, or however we want to work on it.
You know what? I would suggest that be a wonderful project for the CAM group at the Big, is developing a CAM group QBR or strategic business, or, you know, this type of thing. Because I think that actually would be a reason to get together and apply our skills that way.
Yeah. We could do there. Not everybody's going to Big, so we can figure out if that's not the case. We can do it some other way.
They can commute by Zoom.
Yeah, I was going to say we could do it as a working session.
Yeah.
But what I really want to do is, like, what I want to avoid, I guess, is where we just keep having like good ideas.
No, execution time.
Implementing, right?
Yeah, I mean, even if we worked with one of you to say, you know, maybe it's Robin or something like that. Say, okay, if you went to Jerem, just say, here, we want to change the way we do PCR or whatever you call them. Everybody calls them something different, right?
Yeah.
And have a simplified version of it.
Yeah.
Because one of the reasons it looks so complicated is because it's so automated, right? It's all.
No, I love it.
It's all connect ways.
That's the beauty of it, though. It's really a pretty presentation. And we're looking at some tools to try to help streamline some of that data. We have some already that we utilize, just reports that we pull from like data and things like that, that we combine. And we do make our own internal, some of them, but really something for me that I can, that would make it easier for me to pull and make it.
Yeah, and that's all like inputs, right? And you get inputs from anything. I almost avoid conversations about tools because I don't know anything. But what I think is important is that was a very business-like way to have a review with people, right?
Yeah.
Wherever you get the inputs, if you just follow the structure, right?
Right.
May I ask that you consider adding a pricing strategy to our topic, monthly topic? In other words, how to determine pricing, right? And how that reflects back on the packaging and with the presentation. I think that would be helpful for me, at least. I don't know if this would be helpful for others.
Yes.
I'll add it to our rolling list of topics, which is in a folder within Teams for this group. So yeah.
It's interesting.
Would it make sense to put this out as a goal that we will develop as a group a framework that is 8 or 10 months out from now?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think what I'd like to do is do if it's okay with you, is do like rapid prototyping kind of thing first, where we try to get something on paper before, inventing a submarine or something.
I'm going to start going back through NuWave's presentation and going, okay, where do I get this info out of Autotask?
A lot of it is pretty basic L10 stuff, right?
It is.
Yeah.
And I think what I like about L10, I actually really resisted EOS in the beginning because I thought it was like very obvious. But what I saw was it was also very digestible. Like people got it right away and they kind of got into it, and it allowed the flow. A meeting to flow the right way too.
What's running through my head, Michael, is that we could do videos and have on on our website or on a client portal or even on YouTube for our customers, and they would begin to understand the difference that working with us has. They have a place to go to say, you know what I mean? That just this is all coming to mind. My popcorn head is
just
going off.
So you guys know, so this is like 4 steps down the pipe.
Oh yeah.
But the thing I want you to realize, both with your customers, when you talk to your owners when they're selling, is if you're going to a new prospective client, that is really just a preview of what it's going to feel like to be your client. Right? So everybody gets into stuff about differentiation and all that stuff. Differentiation comes down to people.
Yeah.
And if you behave in a different way than your competitors do, and it's more businesslike and it's more professional and you're organized and all that stuff, that's what people buy. To be honest with you, you could line up like 10 MSP offerings, and I defy anybody to pick out the difference. I would say that.
I agree with you if you just looked at it at the spreadsheet level, right?
Yeah, a normal person would be able to figure it out, right? And what they're really trying to do is they'd want to get to know and trust and like you, right? And this process would enable that. What I really want to do with this group, because we're kind of we got to be kind of kind to each other, is just to say, let's figure out how we go from really nice presentation to like how could we start down the path of executing it, doing something different.
Adoption. Right.
And the cool thing is if we create it, we're going to have it and nobody else's. Unless Andy shares it with PBM group or something, but yeah.
But I thought I got permission there.
Well, I think, and I don't know where a lot of this stuff comes from, by the way, but I don't know if those 5 categories are like their kind of unique intellectual capital, or whether that's some kind of framework that I'm unaware of.
When he went back
I feel like
to
it's
review, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, I feel like it's a framework because it's very similar to what we're already doing. So I feel like it's
Well, we could even tie it into a framework if that makes sense. I mean, in a sense, like CIS or whatever it is. But I don't want to get too far down it. It's just like I feel a commitment for you guys to do something game changing, right?
So I use Lifecycle Insights here, and some of that is in there. I've been using it now for I've been using. I would recommend it. I like it a lot. I've been using that for a little over a year now, and you're able to create business, kind of like a business review and recommendations. And let's say one of the let's say when I first used it, I'll give you a bad example, and hopefully maybe you can learn from my mistake. My bad example was I had this client where it was pretty great MRR, and I went in and we were doing Duo MFA for their VPN. We did, and I created all these recommendations, one after the next. Duo MFA for VPN, Microsoft Office 365, cyber insurance. Well, when we got to the point of actually completing them, we were doing great. When I got to the point of completing the Duo, they were able to get their cyber insurance, and that's when they got rid of us. So just be careful when you're going through all of these lists as you're doing that. And I actually hooked them up with TechRug, who you all know, and even they advised me. They were just like, that they've been seeing a lot of that. So
did you just not have a good basis of a relationship with the client to begin with? Because the reason that I asked is we're doing that right now for a client, and it's co-managed IT. And we're in the process of that project, and we should be finished up in just a few days here because they have to. It's a requirement of their insurance.
So what?
I feel like our relationship is strong, but I just wanted to find out how you're.
So I found out after the fact that they had some investors come in on the back end, and other people were driving the situation. They had recently expanded to another state, and I was like, "Ooh, cool! They're expanding to another state," but I didn't really investigate that as much as I should. So the advice that was given to me with the cyber insurance and the Duo was to see if I could have had them basically before doing the duo and getting them to sign the cyber insurance, now it would have taken some dancing around to do this, but redo my contracts to where either it was a new contract that was going to last a full another year as part of doing the duo.
Adding the service, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So basically, I'll do this, and we'll do this duo and this cyber insurance, but we need to renew your contract now because we're changing so much stuff. So that was the advice that was given to me, and I've actually been doing that with just about everybody as we go in and do these major projects.
I think your situation was a pure anomaly, because off the top of my head, I know 100 people that sold a duo and didn't have the same issue. I'm not even being facetious.
So Dan,
but it's
just as a cyber insurance
nothing to do with your situation. I think the cornerstone of what they did too, you just struck a thought, which is, I think you need to identify your stack in order for this process to work as well, right? Yeah. Like, you almost got to tell people they got to have duo or whatever your stack is, MDA or whatever the stuff, MDF.
Yeah, agreed.
Do you know what I mean? And I think that's a healthy exercise for everybody.
Yeah, I learned from it, and so far I've been able to go in with Lifecycle and just start creating these recommendations for everybody, and then the other side of that is that's kind of a lot of these recommendations. If they're bigger projects, I wait until the contract's coming up for renewal, and I kind of say, we can bake this in, or it'll cost extra, and it actually has worked out really well. Yeah, so
that's why I always want to refer back to that Eric, the guy who presented last session, which is what he's really good at, is rolling that up at an executive level decision conversation, right?
Yeah.
So you don't get into all this, we're doing it to buy insurance, right? It's
right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm not very good at co-manage, I'll say.
Co-manage is hard for everybody, by the way. Those guys are probably one of the most advanced people for co-manage. They got 20-25 clients that are co-managed.
Wow.
And that alone is that's not client account management. That's a whole different discipline. It's called program management.
Hey Dan, I got one quick question. So when you kind of give the idea of renewing the contract to a full year, do you often get pushback from that? I feel like some people wouldn't take that deal.
No, I don't.
Really?
Yeah, okay. I've gotten pushback on 3-year deals. But I've only had a pushback from one prospect about a month ago on a 1-year term, and then I even gave him a month, and it just wasn't a good fit. But no, existing clients I have not had pushback on 1-year terms. I just don't. I felt really uncomfortable about doing it. But
we just like to let them roll over.
Yeah, the way I approach it is, this is a partnership, and we need to, if we're doing a bad job, we can't get out of this just as much as you can. I mean, obviously, if we do a really bad job, we're not going to keep you in the contract, but we want to make sure that you're happy and that we're doing the best we can. I also have to buy a lot of software that comes with 1-year terms, and I can't just eat that cost up front.
No, of course not.
Okay. That's a great way of explaining it. Yeah. And it gives you a sense of a temperature check too when you have that conversation. So
yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Might be worth having you preview, what's it called? What do you use? Dan?
Lifecycle?
Lifecycle.
I really like that
with Lifecycle. I don't know anything about it.
I did the initial basically they did like a promo thing for me or whatever, and so we did a Zoom session and they kind of went through it with me for just half hour. I liked what I saw, but I wasn't sure if anybody else was using it. Like I said, we're investigating tools, so that's really the only one I've looked at so far. So thank you, Dan. I appreciate it.
Yeah, there's a couple of them. There's one called Cloud Radio that I've heard of, but like I said, what I really want for you guys is almost, I'm kind of tool agnostic in a sense, but some kind of input that feeds into what we saw today, right?
Yeah.
Which was a business structure for the tool to make sense to the person you're talking to. Yep. And it's a platform to manage the relationship. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. It's everything about it's, again, how do humans agree on stuff in a sense, right? If my vision for you guys is if we got you that, and then we taught you the sales, not the sales side, but the consultative side of it, then you got the whole game. Right. It's the one thing they didn't talk about was, I think you can tell that Chad's a good sales guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, he
So
is.
a lot of those recommendations are based a lot on his personal ability to sell. So you want to take that out of it so that the sales process is the same as the recommend, when you recommend something, it's kind of like Eric Hart did it, right? When you recommended something, he was quote unquote selling, but he doesn't come off that way, right?
No.
Mhm.
That's because he's part of the operations department, not the sales
There you go.
department.
Well, you're going to start lobbying to
See,
work
you were
for
paying
the
attention,
service.
I'm going to lobby to Jerem, yes, because
Yeah.
he's pulled me kicking and screaming into this role because I'm like, nope,
Yeah.
don't want to do sales, don't want to do sales.
I mean, a part of it is building rapport too, isn't it? Just making
Oh,
sure
for
that they
sure.
trust you.
Yeah,
It
of
just
course.
makes selling
Yes.
so much easier. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I do have one quick question if you guys don't mind, because
Please.
Go
I'm
ahead.
going to be doing my very first onboarding solo in 2 days. Anybody have any quick tips?
Do you have a complete checklist already?
Yeah.
We're doing our next meeting in 5 minutes here is to go over is to prep for the onboarding. So I will have my checklist.
Okay, do you have a support person to help you implement?
I will have a technical person with me. Yes.
How much
Good.
due diligence? I'm sorry.
That's all right.
How much due diligence?
Yeah, was done.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we do have a pretty good process for our onboarding. I've just not done one by myself. And I don't want to I know we have a lot of information we have to gather, and I want to figure out how to not make it so technical and just so question after question. I want to make it a little engaging for the
So Robin,
customer.
my suggestion would be, as Michael had said, or as the person said on the phone, your whole business relationship is really determined in the first couple months.
Right.
Investing extra time now and
Yeah.
building relationships and understanding workflows goes a long way to helping you down the road.
Thank you.
It is a real differentiator. It is this is the time to pour on the extra effort, and it's like planting seeds. It grows into a money tree.
Yeah. Perfect. And that's what I want to do. Like I said, I mean, I don't want to, take up too much of their time outside of what the task that we need to accomplish. But I also want to build that relationship right out of the gate. I want to build that rapport. So
can you go on site and be there and have someone remote do the technical part of it? Can you meet with them?
basically our onboarding meeting is more of a data gathering after we've already done the initial. They're already working on some of the technical aspects of it, but this is more the business onboarding as well, and then some additional information that we might need, vendor relations, that kind of stuff.
So how have you gotten to the supervisory and end user level in the specific roles for for accounting, for HR? How do you know who's going to have the problems and who's not going to have the problems?
Well, I think this is again fact-finding mission. It's part of us.
That's
trying
what I'm
to
saying.
figure this out. So yeah,
meeting with them as best you can is the best way.
Yeah,
to do
that's
that.
what. We're meeting with them on site, and it's something a little bit different than what we've done. With our services too, where it's a charter school, so this will be our first of that kind. So a little bit different. But yeah, hopefully just building the relationship right out of the gate, I guess, is the most important thing.
Management, I've found management by walking around and meeting the people that are gonna either sing your praises or sing your sorrows to the decision maker. Because that decision maker does not want to hear about IT. He's paying you for that.
Yeah, find the coach. You need a coach internally, sometimes referred to as a sponsor, but they are an advocate for you.
Perfect.
And there's nothing stronger than having somebody internally who is going to be your spokesperson, so to speak.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Right.
I'd like to add one thing that I do for our onboardings that I find builds camaraderie is you have to do this on site though. I don't think it has the same magnitude doing it remotely. I start out with the point of contact, POC is what we call it. I start there. We have, you know, our talk, and then I start out with a question. I'm going to walk around. I just let them know I'm going to walk around. I'm going to talk to everybody with a computer. I'm just going to say, hi, I'm your new IT person. My name is Robin. And on a scale from 1 to 10, how would you rate the performance of your IT, of your technology? And then just let them talk, because the stuff that you'll get out of them is amazing. Like, some people will tell you, my monitor's a piece of crap, my computer sucks, my mouse is stupid, you know what, everything is fine. And then they just kind of unload, and it actually is kind of fun. And then you just that's what I do, and it kind of builds, it just lets them talk, and then you go back, and then with that whole list you go back to the POC, and then you have your whole working, what's everybody's problems.
Okay, no, I like that. I like that. Plus, I like to get to know all the end users if we can, because, you know, we interact with them more than we do the higher levels. So yeah, I like that, getting that on a personal level as well. Thank you very much, Dan.
Yeah, good luck.
Thank you.
Stay confident, Robin. You got this.
I got this. Thank you.
We'll ask you how it went when we see you again, or just let us know in Teams. Just put something out there in Teams.
Okay.
You know, have a chat about it.
Perfect. Thank you.
That's what Teams is for.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate the support.
Okay, great. That's how it works best in groups. Any final comments, questions before we leave? This recording will be in the folder for the recordings. There is a PowerPoint material we didn't get to.
We'll get to it
that will be in there as well, but we'll get to it at the next meeting. And I would say, in the meantime, keep utilizing the modules on the training platform. It's there for you. Your company is paying for it. And I will go in and just take a look at how everybody's doing. I might send a reminder email to anyone to say, you know, try to keep up with the pace of the modules. I know it means setting aside time, but do your best to utilize it, because it is part of our program.
Thank you for the reminder. I have not done that.
Okay.
To do
all
that.
right.
I have to make time. Time is the problem. Finding it. Okay.
Okay, everybody.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Appreciate it.
Bye.
Have a
Great
good one.
meeting.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Yeah, great
Bye-bye.
meeting. Bye.
Thank you.